Alright, so this is problem number 1A from the practice exam 1. This is the free response section, section 2, and this is from the Litvin book that you received copies of exam 1, and then you also just received copies of exam 2 through 5 from the same book. So plenty of practice free response questions, and hopefully by the time we get done going through each one of those, if you spend the time to look over those questions, you'll start to see some sort of parallels as far as the type of questions you may see on your AP free response questions. Similar content, maybe different context for each problem, but hopefully you'll learn some of the tricks needed and some of the concepts that you can use when you actually take the exam here in a little over a week. So what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at this first problem that simply asks you to take a string of text and replace several characters in a given text string, starting at a given index with a new substring. And I'm just obviously reading this from the method description given in the comment here. If you notice, this method has 4 parameters, takes in a string, 2 integers, and then another string. Those are listed as text, I, N, and sub. So text is going to be the string that we want to actually change. That's going to be the beginning text string that we're going to actually modify. I is going to be the index where we're going to make the replacement in that string. N represents a number of characters that we're going to replace, so this is actually going to be how many letters or how many characters we're replacing. And then we're going to take this new string called sub, and that's what's going to fill in that gap when we replace the characters. So we're assuming, according to the description of this method, that sub is going to be the exact same length as n, so to speak. It may actually be a little bit different. If it is, then we will just realize that the value, when we're actually including our text string here, we're going to basically just override those characters, whether it's shorter or longer. We'll see how that works out. And then finally we're going to return the modified text. So whatever we do to this line of text, however we build it, to whether we store it in a new string or just simply manipulate the current string, we're going to return that text. So this one's seems a little complicated, maybe a little wordy, but it's actually pretty straightforward. If you were in class on Tuesday, you probably saw this worked out in class, but if not, or if you're looking back over it now, hopefully this will make sense. So what we want to do is we want to take our text and keep everything the same up until we reach this index I. So what we're going to do is I'm going to build a separate string. I'm going to call it str. You could override the current string, it really doesn't matter. But I'm going to build a new string using parts of the original, then the substituted part in the middle, and then whatever remains after the substituted part. So to get the intro, the beginning part of this text, up to that index, we're going to call the text string. We're going to use the substring method on that string object. And if I want everything up to that index where we're going to start our replacement, I want to start at position 0, so that's the first character of the original text, and go up to but don't include position I. So what that's going to do is that's going to simply give us the intro part of the text, so everything up to that index. Then we want to add in our substitute word. So instead of picking up at letter I and going with what was originally there, we want to replace those characters with this substitute word, which is called sub. Okay. And then if we, after the substitute word, if there's any remaining parts of that string, we were replacing in characters. So if we think about it, if we picked up right where we stopped, that would be position I. So if we want to skip in characters, that means we want to pick up with whatever was left of that string, starting at not position I, but in characters later, which is I plus N. Okay, and then we want to go with the rest of the string, whatever is still there. So start at position I plus N and go to the end and include that. Okay, so we're not going to give it a second parameter. We're not going to tell it where to stop, because if we just give it one parameter, it starts here and goes all the way to the end of the text. Okay, so that builds a string with the beginning part of the text. Then we substitute that word in. We replace those characters with the subword, and then we include the end of the original text. And then all we want to do is make sure that we return that, because if we notice here it asks us to return a string. So I'm going to return the string we just built, str, and we are done. Okay. We could test this out. If we weren't sure what was going on, we could do sort of an example here. We could come up with a line of text. So suppose we say we have the phrase, I don't know, this question is done. Okay. If I look at this text and suppose I want to replace this word question here with the phrase this problem is done. Okay. In this case, my text would be this phrase. This is my original text. If I want to replace this word question, then that means I want to go to position, and I'm going to count these off. Remember, the first position is always 0, so T is 0, H would be 1, I would be 2, S would be 3, the space would be 4, so that means the word question starts at position 5. So that means my I in this problem would be 5. And then how many characters do we want to replace? Well, how long is the word? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 would be the number of characters we want to replace. And then what do we want to put in its place? We want to put in a substitute word. We said we were going to switch it from this question is done to this problem is done. And so my substitute word would simply be the phrase problem, or the string problem. Okay? So let's think about what would happen here. We would have a substring of their text from position 0 up to, but not including position I. So that means it would start at 0, cover 1, 2, 3, 4, but it would stop right before it gets to position I, which was 5. So it would take everything from 0 to 4. So what is that going to do? That would give us the phrase THIS and then a space. Okay, and I'll just put a little dash underneath to represent a space. So that's the first part right here where we do the substring from 0 to I. Then we add in our keyword, our substitute word, which is problem. And then we're supposed to go to position I plus n. Well, let's count this up. I plus n would be position 5 plus 8, which is 13. So let's keep going here. U would be 6, E would be 7, S would be 8, T would be 9, I is 10, O is 11, N is 12. So position 13 is going to be this space right here in between the words question and is. So if we start at position 13, which was 5 plus 8, I plus n, and we go to the end of the text, what's that going to include? It's going to pick up right here after the word. So I'm just going to kind of block this off the areas we were talking about earlier. So we took the first part, replaced that with the word sub, and now we're picking up right here. It was a little sloppy there, but picking up at position 13, and we're going to add in the space and then the phrase is done. Okay? And so when we add all that together, what do we get? We get a single string called this problem is done. Again, those spaces were included, and we then return that text and we're done. Okay? So that's part 1A. Hopefully that makes a little more sense to you what this method is doing. It's replacing one word or one section of our text and then returning that string. So go ahead and move on to part 1B.